Good morning, world. I'm Steve Rao. I'm sorry for the slow Wi-Fi, but you can hear my voice on global podcast, Pod TV, and Roku TV. And I am the host of World Edition. And on this show, we bring you global news, talk about an increasingly turbulent political world, a turbulent economy, and as we navigate through a post-COVID economy and a post-COVID world, we look at a very different world every day. I greet you live from the All-America city of Morrisville in the 8th largest state in the United States of America, North Carolina. Today, before I begin my monologue on a very interesting week, I wanted to first say that the biggest event of the day is President Donald Trump becoming the first former president of the United States to be charged formally with the crime. A grand jury in New York has indicted the president for hush money payments. We don't know the specifics to Stormy Daniels, but it's a big deal because it's the first time a U.S. president has been charged with a crime. Now, he could be handcuffed and he will be going to court on Tuesday, but let's be clear here. He is still expecting to run for the presidency, and even if he is convicted, he can still run. That is something I think that is very interesting, and his base actually seems even more excited about him becoming the president. We'll be talking about that. Finland took a big step toward joining NATO when Turkey voted to approve them. This would make the NATO border across Russia even larger. Severe storms are expected today. Millions may lose their Medicaid coverage after the pandemic emergency has been lifted. 5 states will begin cutting off people, although North Carolina has expanded Medicaid. And the Final Four starts this weekend. Gwyneth Paltrow and we got Florida Atlantic, the Cinderella team, playing San Diego State and Connecticut and Miami. So here's my week and my monologue. This Tuesday, I had the honor of attending and meeting the 46th President of the United States, Joseph R. Biden. On Tuesday, the president visited Durham to kick off his administration's Investing in America tour. This 3-week tour basically focused on his major legislation, the CHIPS and Science Act, the American Rescue Plan, the Inflation Reduction Act. And he was joined there by our Governor, Roy Cooper, Secretary of Commerce, Nicole Raimondo, and Gina Raimondo, and United States Congresswoman Valerie Fouché, Durham Mayor O'Neill, and Congressman Wiley Nickel. Many other elected officials were there, and he really was touring Wolfspeed. This is a Durham company that manufactures semiconductors. And they recently announced a $5 billion investment in Chatham County. He toured with the governor and along many elected officials the Wolfspeed facility. And then he greeted the leaders that gathered there. He began his plea to Congress on asking for gun reform after the tragedy in Nashville, which we'll talk about today. But the main thing the president said is he recognized North Carolina's growing role in domestic manufacturing. In fact, he pointed to Wolfspeed's future manufacturing facility as an incoming multi-billion-dollar production facility by VinFast, a Vietnamese electric car company. Apparently, they will be using some of that money from the $280 billion CHIPS Act for their expansion. The president was excited about making these investments, and he touted that he signed the CHIPS Act to do exactly that, to bring back manufacturing jobs to the U.S., and claims that since he's become president, we have $475 billion of manufacturing investment coming into our country, with $16 billion coming to North Carolina. Now, here's my final take. As I was standing in line, somebody told the president that I grew up in Delaware. The president stopped and asked me, "You were from Delaware?" I said, "Yes. I won the state high school championship there in 1987. Well, somewhere along the line, I went from someone wanting to get a picture or selfie to actually talking to the President of the United States. And I tried to end the conversation, but we talked for about 5.5, probably 6 minutes. Then we got to spend some time after. During the conversation, we talked about Delaware, cheesesteaks, crab based seasoning, tennis, University of Delaware, and St. Andrews, my alma mater, where he has many friends whose children still go there. Everybody around was wondering what would Steve Rao be talking to with the President of the United States, but I must say it was a great experience, one that I will cherish for the rest of my life. I want to thank former Senator Floyd McKissick for taking pictures because I was so engaged in the conversation that I didn't take my phone out of my pocket. Fortunately, there was a nice picture taken, and I'm going to post that on my social media platforms, which I've already done. So hopefully one day we can all, on Roku TV, take a trip to the White House at the invitation of the president. But I know there's some members of our team that will most likely decline the offer. Let's get started. I got to leave, but I'll be back at 10:30. Mark, go ahead and get started. Bring in our guests.
No problem at all. I'm glad that you had a chance to meet the president. We actually didn't do the news yesterday because I had to go on a tour myself, and that tour was actually with the Hebrew Israelites. So they were actually in Durham, and they were actually in Durham for the duration of this week or the rest of this week and all in that space. So it was very interesting meeting several of them. It was a fairly decent sized group of about several hundred that came to the Hayti Heritage Center to learn about the history of Hayti, the Black Wall Street, and a number of other things. So I was glad to be able to help with that tour along with several others that were there on yesterday morning. So
well, Mark, I'm going to be back. I'm going to be back at 10:30. I have to jump on a call, but I'm going to be right back at 10:30. Okay. And then
no problem at all.
We're going to bring in Lee Newt, and we're going to pick back up on the Trump indictment, and then talk a little bit about the Chips and Science Act and Dr. Ronnie Chatterjee and his work on that area. Thank you. Hello, Lee. I feel differently now that I've actually spoken to a president. Thank you.
Glad to have both of you here. Hey, Lee, you're on mute. You're talking on mute, Lee. So you got to get off of mute. So you're on the mute button there and all in that space. There we go. Now he's off mute.
Hey, Mark, you mentioned you met some people yesterday. What group was this in?
And like I said, it was a group that I had mentioned to y'all before. It was the Hebrew Israelites. Some of them are folks that believe that they are the original descendants of Israel from back in the biblical days. So that is what the Hebrew Israelites are all about. They're actually in town to celebrate Passover weekend.
That was my next question. Okay. Yeah. You answered my question. They celebrate Passover.
Yes. So they were in town for this, and they were in town to learn a lot about the nature of the community here. And they were going to different places. They actually went to Hayti and the Black Wall Street. They also went to the Stagville Plantation, which is a former plantation. It is a historical area here. And I think they went to a number of other stops. I want to say that the conference is in Raleigh, but they actually went between Raleigh and Durham. So it was, like I said, that we were wondering about the logistics, because as Dan knows from working in an education facility, and I'm sure as you know, logistics can be a very interesting thing when you're trying to move that many people around on charter buses. So it was interesting in trying to get the logistics, and there were 4 of us that were serving as the guides on each bus. And then there were some others that were more like performance people that were doing performance pieces around some of the historical figures that existed in Durham, including Pauline Murray, W.E.B. Du Bois, and a number of others that either were from this area or visited this area at one time or another. So,
Mark, I would ask you a question. Dan could probably confirm this or not. The Passover's next week. The Seder, was that not Jesus's Last Supper? Am I wrong?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's very interesting. What are folks' thoughts? We'll get off of that. But like I said, I just wanted to share a little bit about that, since folks are probably going like, why are they running the rerun yesterday and all in that space? But I think that we managed and definitely got around, and it was a worthwhile event that I attended and everything. But we're hearing, and I was actually on Clubhouse yesterday, and the general assessment that I heard when I was on Clubhouse, and many people know that social app and everything, is one, there is little to no chance of the indictment actually leading to criminals time, whether you want it or don't want it, and all in that space. And there were also some interesting debates that were going on, because one of the debates was whether you can actually withhold information from a president if you're afraid that the president might be compromised, because that was a whole debate that was going on. And there were some people that saying that you could and that generals have the right to do it. There were others that were saying that the president pretty much has carte blanche and that you can't hold him accountable for any of those things, including the nuclear codes and a number of other things that he is supposed to have at his disposal. So I don't know what their folks' thoughts are about that. And I'll also bring in Sasha to hear what he's got to say about the indictment. But that was part of the conversations that I was hearing in social media as to whether the president has total access to everything, or whether there are times that he can be held restricted, for lack of a better term.
Mark, I'm confused. What's the purpose of this indictment? New York State, New York City has no bail laws to begin with. And also, for the last number of years, murderers, thieves of all kinds were just being let off, downgraded charges. And so what's the whole purpose of this? Is this just vindictive or what?
I mean,
Yeah.
Just because he can.
Pretty
some
much
people
been.
say that it is a political move, and some people say it is a political move that could have serious backfiring consequences and all in that space. But it'll be interesting to see. Apparently, there's been efforts to indict the president on a number of charges. This was the latest one, the Stormy Daniels and the hush money and all of that. There are some other ones that could come out from some other investigations. Now, whether this is going to actually be the one that gets the president in trouble, or whether it actually, as Steve just alluded to, galvanizes his base, that's going to be an interesting question.
Yeah,
So,
Mark, anyone who doesn't like Trump doesn't like him already. There's no shocker here. Anyone who likes Trump, this is just going to make them want to support him more and make them believe that the system is out to get him. There's no relevations, and it's not going to stop him from running for the presidency.
well, the other question.
I would like to mention something. First of all, Trump is now taking notes who supports him out of the largely the senators and the House representatives, and knowing how vindictive he is. So I'm pretty sure, and you already saw some interview in the morning, I think Lindsey Graham, for example, he is very vocal of supporting Trump and so on. And there will be several others. I have no doubts about that. But then the essence of all that is that we have a major political party who is run in 2 days. He will become a fugitive, because I don't believe that he will come for the booking process, because once he'll take his pictures and fingerprints, and how can you win a nomination, never mind general election, when everywhere there will be his pictures of being fingerprinted and so on. Now, fingerprinted, I'm not suggesting that because of that he's guilty. There is a due process, which may take a couple of years. Then there are several other charges are forthcoming. So those will take several years to deal with. So here's in a process. I forgot who said, one of the journalists said that the Trump is cooked for the rest of his life, and by the time he will spend all the legal fees, there will be nothing left of him.
If there's any validity to these charges, why does every other prosecutor fail to decline to bring them earlier?
Well, they wanted to prepare such I'll explain. They wanted the grand jury to indict. So they need, it doesn't matter whether they will come.
Okay, so in New York, you can indict a ham sandwich.
You have to indict.
And they could have done that 5 years ago, Sasha. They could have done it 4 years ago.
No, they could not, because they refused to.
At that time.
Yeah,
so that's what I think.
Nothing new came out.
No. Well, listen, it's up to the general prosecutor in New York to decide when to go ahead with the indictment.
It was dropped by the previous prosecutor because there was no there.
It was not there. There were no more at that time. There were a process of January 6th and so on. See, I think the strategic mistake of Republican Party is that when all that happened on January 6th, on January 7th, they had to declare that that's it. It's no longer party of Trump. We are a Republican Party. We are standing for this and such, and just free and just fly. No, they are still shackled to Donald Trump. Donald Trump is, by Tuesday, he has to go through the booking process. I'm pretty sure that he will try to incite his base and so on. And so my take is he will become a fugitive by Tuesday.
Oh, I think
Sasha,
you're
how much of this
wrong.
do you think is blind justice versus just pure hatred from
It's
Trump?
hatred. It's all hatred.
Oh, hatred for sure. Yeah, there's a hatred. Why
Yeah,
not?
you hate it. You hate him, right?
I do. Yes, I do
Yeah,
passionately.
I know.
I do passionately
A
hate.
question for both of you.
He's a real human garbage, and I'm so sorry to see that the major party is associated itself with the real human garbage from all
The real
angles.
human garbage. Yeah.
It is.
A
Yeah, there you
question
go.
for both of you, and this is actually something that Lee just brought up and everything, and I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts on this. But if you are a diehard fan of Trump, I agree that you will be definitely backing him strongly and all in that space. If you're one of those folks that is not a fan of Trump, you will definitely not be backing him and all in that line. But one of the things that happens in elections is there is a vast amount of people that are not diehards on either side of the Republican Democrat divide. They're more like neutral kind of folks. They're independents and things along those lines. So is the indictment, and this is a question that I was wondering, and I've heard some of the discussions around it, going to mobilize those in one way or the other? Because that is what both parties are more interested in, is the independence and getting the independence. So how is this going to impact the independence?
I think it's going to affect things much. And this is why, because everyone knows that facially this charge is motivated only for political reasons.
There's no merit to it.
Yeah, exactly. It's not only the statute of limitations is passed. There's no there with respect to the election interference. It's a federal crime. State prosecutor has no right to be even considering it. The payment of hush money is not illegal. It certainly wasn't a campaign contribution. Again, there's no there. Now, whether Trump is a reprehensible human being is another matter, and Sasha may have a point there. But Joe Biden
Legally, that's irrelevant.
Joe Biden is a reprehensible human being. They're both reprehensible. I don't know why we run these low life people for president of the United States, and undermines the integrity of the presidency. The Democrats should be ashamed of themselves for running Joe Biden or anyone else, really. I don't see anybody in their party with moral authority. And the Republicans have the same problem. There's nobody in their party that has any moral authority, because they've all prostituted themselves to the corruption of the system. Between the Chinese and the Russians and the Saudis and the Israelis and everyone else, we are an owned country with tremendous influence by foreign nationals in our investment systems, in our media, and every other form. And, we should be ashamed of that. Our security services are behind this because they're so freaking entrenched. And, it's going to be a difficult thing to try to uncork all that, right?
Yeah, because it's getting worse and worse as we speak, unfortunately.
Yeah, so you can't really support Biden either, because he's a lowlife. I mean, that's the problem. I mean, he just is a lowlife, and his family's a lowlife. I mean, seriously. I mean, the things that, oh God, I don't understand. I don't understand why we as American people put up with this stuff. Really, honestly.
Dan, Clinton looks like an angel compared to.
Oh no, she doesn't. That's the problem. Clinton was involved in all this Epstein stuff and everything else. I mean, they were taking money from foreign governments and their Clinton Foundation. The Clinton is as dirty as Joe Biden or more. Their wealth is entirely built upon. They were bankrupt when they left the White House. Their wealth is entirely built upon corruption, right?
Yeah, but then he started to write books and so on and on. And all
Oh,
this
yeah.
stuff about Epstein, it became evident well after he already ceased to be a president. Okay.
Well, yeah, but there's that red dress he posed in when, I couldn't. Such
Hey,
a funny thing.
Sasha, just switching slightly, and we may come back to this in a minute. But one of the things that I saw, and I know you're going to deal with Russia and Ukraine and your show coming up at 11 o'clock. But one of the things that I saw in the news that I found interesting today actually came from the sports world. And that was the fact that Wimbledon, and we know that a lot of people, including Steve, who's usually here, are tennis fans and everything, but they have declared that Russia and Ukraine will be allowed to play their athletes, but they have to play as neutral. And I was just wondering if you had heard about that and what your thoughts were around that, because that just came down the news as well, that they are going
You're
to
saying
allow
Russia and Ukrainian.
I mean, Russia and Belarus. I'm sorry. I said that
Belarus.
right.
Okay, it's a different story. There is a new movement started the next year. There will be Olympiad, World Olympiad in Paris, in France.
Right.
So now the play is to disallow Russian and Belarusian athletes to participate under flag or no flag or in any shape or form. Just simply, they cannot attend the games, period,
Right.
stop. And that is getting organized. It's getting underway because it's unbearable even to see this Russian and Belarus. Even now, this tennis tournament in Miami, you see there were many Russian and Belarusian athletes. Finally, they all lost already, but still they were playing. And so a lot of time, even if you wouldn't see their flag, but you would see them and you know that Russia dared to arrest American journalist and put them they're incarcerated him for almost 2 months. He will be in jail until May 29th. That's what they did, and they never done it since 1986. And 1986, it wasn't even Russia; it was Soviet Union. So now, supposedly, Russia became a big friend, and this I don't want to call him stupid, but difficult to find other word. The Papa Bush, when by 1992, by 1992, Russia was completely disabled country. The government of Russia, they had to, including Yeltsin and Gaidar and all the other officials, they had a session, the only single point of which was where to find $10,000 to pay port charges in Rotterdam. And there was a ship full of grain for Russia and paid for already. They couldn't release it because they couldn't find $10,000. So if the US at the time would offer $1 billion, $5 billion, doesn't matter, for all their nuclear arsenal, please deliver that or we will take care of ourselves, we'll get it out. Here's your couple of $1 billion. Oh, no, okay, $10 billion would do. Now, if Russia would refuse, no help whatsoever. Just die there, and unless you'll deliver all your stockpile. And the people in all over the world would be relieved from where they are living now under the threat of nuclear annihilation. That would never happen anymore. There would be no Ukraine invasion. There would be a lot of things would be completely different.
Sasha?
Yes.
I'm sorry, just a quick question. I think we all agree that Putin is not a Boy Scout. Is there any logic to his madness?
A logic of his madness is he wants to retain a power. He wants to be the most popular politician, and even not in just Russia, all over the world. And he is very sensitive how popular is he, even with his own people. Unfortunately, there is a new development now in Russia. You see, it was believed that it was Putin's war. He started the war. Russian people never wanted the war. They're peaceful people. They were misinformed and so on. But now the situation is changing. Now, majority of Russian people, and I'm not talking about 60%, I'm talking about 85, if not 90%, they believe, yeah, probably the war is unjust. Probably it shouldn't even be started in the first place. But it started, it's a war, and we must win the war. And the only people who disallow us to win the war are obviously Ukrainians themselves, but also all other countries who support Ukraine. So, well, we are not going to fight with other countries like United States or France or Germany, no, but we are going to defeat Ukraine because that's the only obstacle for us. We had beautiful life before the beginning of the war. Now it started, okay, that's a problem, maybe it shouldn't have started, but it did. So now we have to win the war. And how you win the war? By destruction, by killing all people, whether it's military personnel or civilians, and you rape women and children and so on. That's how you win the war. Do it. So now a lot of people in Russia accusing Putin, that he is not fighting the right way. He is too liberal. He wants to be popular. No, 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 no. We don't need him to be popular. Just go and do your job. Kill people. That's now, so there is no point to discuss it. Well, some Russians are good Russians. They are against the war. Some Russians are supporting Putin. No, 90%, I go as far as 90, maybe it's even more, unfortunately, support Putin. And they accuse him that he is not fighting the best possible way. He's not killing enough Ukrainians. He's not pursuing, even if he should have probably cut out the supply lines from Western countries to Ukraine, military lines, financial, and all others. So who knows? Maybe unfortunately it's coming.
Hey, Sasha, this latest move by Turkey and the Turkish parliament, they're kind of like having a split vote apparently earlier today on Scandinavia, because they said that they would ratify Finland's NATO accession, and they're going to leave Sweden waiting right now. Who knows? Maybe they'll ratify that later on. But is this going to have any impact of these two countries joining NATO in the greater scheme, or is this just a more global politics as usual?
I don't think it's very important information, Mark, because Turkey voiced their objection about Sweden. So maybe they will need more time to, or maybe they want to bargain for some preferences or so on, if they will allow Sweden. But with Finland, there was nothing really for them to object. So Finland will become very shortly member of NATO. It has enormous, several hundred kilometers, probably even more than 1,000 kilometers border with Russia. So, so basically, Putin, he did to Russia incredible things that no foreign country, no Tsar, or not even communists done to Russia, whatever. Putin did. Completely destroyed economy. Yes, destroying now his army. NATO, instead of what he said before the beginning of war in Ukraine, get all your stuff and go back to the borders of NATO by 1997. Okay, so instead, not that never happened, but instead new members are now joining NATO. And Finnish army, by the way, is very well equipped and can fight Russians like nobody else, by the way. So that's where we are.
There's another small country that is making a parallel, and they are actually in New York today, speaking of New York and all of that. But the leader, Tsai, is in New York, and it said that Taiwan, like Ukraine, is fighting for democracy. So I was just wondering if folks' thoughts around that, and if that is another part of the world that we need to be concerned about, or do we need to get this one settled before we start dealing with whether Taiwan will be invaded by China, or whether Taiwan is fighting for democracy as much as Ukraine is, because that is what the parallel is that they are making. But I don't know your take on this, Sasha, or anybody else has any thoughts as to whether Taiwan needs to be involved in the conversation as well. Because I know oftentimes you will say that Ukraine is fighting for all world democracy, and I think that is the argument that Taiwan is
Mark,
making.
are they fighting for democracy or fighting for independence?
They said they're fighting for democracy, is what Taiwan says.
Well, they're not. They're not a recognized nation. That's the problem. They belong to China.
Right, and Ukraine was a recognized nation. That is a very much true statement.
But Ukraine, unlike Taiwan, is an independent nation.
Yeah, right.
Unlike Taiwan, China hasn't attacked Taiwan, but Russia has attacked Ukraine. Okay, so there's a big difference. I wouldn't put it in one basket. The Ukraine and Taiwan. Sorry to say.
Yeah. Well, I imagine other countries will start doing this as well, where they will try to make the parallel so that they can get some of the support from the United States and other Western nations. I'm sure that that's what Zai is doing, is that she is making this appeal so that they can get some of that similar money that Ukraine is getting. I mean, you're never going to get that kind of military money.
Do you think that Taiwan needs money? Taiwan is very well to do financially. They have all kinds of weapons and ammunition, and even without Western help, I can't see really how China can attack successfully Taiwan. And actually, China is watching very carefully what's happening in the war with Ukraine, because if they see that all civilized world supports Ukraine, and the same thing will definitely happen if they will attack Taiwan. That's not that China wants to be messed. They're very careful, and they're not getting into some type of politics like Putin does. He's reckless. He's a gambler, not very smart one, by the way. And there will be a payback time.
The only difference is that Joe Biden is owned by China, so. That's the difference.
I mean, there's some people that would argue that there are folks on the Republican side that have been owned by China as well. So, like I said, there's a number of influences around a lot
Mark,
of the
whole Washington is owned by China. Let's be fair.
Well, most of them are, yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
And that is one of the things that folks are saying, and all in that space. I think Steve's back, so we'll bring Steve back into the conversation and all along those lines. But one of the questions I was going to ask, and Steve might have some thoughts around this, is he is
Steve was just giddy this morning. Just giddy.
That space is, a lot of times when we think about politics, we think about
never
economics.
wash that hand.
Yeah,
right?
we think about economics and all in that space. And there seems to be, and this is, Sasha may have some thoughts. I know Lee will have some thoughts, but we're getting like some mixed messages here in my mind, because they are saying that, as Steve mentioned earlier, that millions of Americans are about to lose their coverage in Medicaid. I know Nick has brought that up several times over the last several years of Pod TV being around and everything. And then there are notes from the S&P 500 that are saying that the stocks are wrapping up a volatile but winning first quarter, because the first quarter is just now ending. But there's also news about dogged inflation. So one, what is the state of our economy? And also, what is the state of our economy going to
do
in the election? Because there are some news that sounds like it's winning.
I started that. That was my phone. I changed my ringtone to Hail to the Chief. I'm sorry.
No joke.
Go to hell, the Chief, right?
What? No, I'm sorry, Mark.
Yeah, no problem. Steve, you have any thoughts, or anybody else? I know Sasha does a show around modern investments, but where are we in the economy? Because a lot of times when it comes to politics, and whether it's local or national politics, the big concern is the economics, because people want to know how it is impacting their own lives.
Yeah, I don't know if Biden agreed to come on here as a podcast guest.
No, there's no way.
There's no way, because
they only go on the national, like CNN and that stuff.
Yeah, he won't go on Fox News either.
But I mean, let me take a stab at that, and then we're gonna, come back and talk about the Trump indictment. But we'll focus on it on Monday. But I think there is good economic activity happening in North Carolina with, Wolfspeed, for example, which is a semiconductor manufacturer, and they're doing a $5 billion investment, 1,800 jobs in Chatham County here, and they are going to be using some of the money from the CHIPS Act to actually bring back some of these jobs. That's good. I mean, and it might even be the result of some of Trump's work as well, that we've had about $435 billion of investment in manufacturing in America, and North Carolina has seen 16 billion. But Mark, I think as it relates to politically and what people are going to resonate with, it's really what they're paying for with gas at the pump. What are they paying for groceries? What are they paying for their housing? What are they? Millions are losing Medicaid benefits actually today and tomorrow because they. And so I think those are the issues people are doing, and inflation, which I think even if the Feds continue to raise rates or tailor it back, you're still going to be looking at inflation around maybe 4% as we end the year, maybe a little bit lower. So that's going to be the biggest challenge for Joe Biden and the Democrats is how do they, show immediate benefits into the wallets and pockets of the American people. These CHIPS Acts and things like that are good symbolic moves by the president, but whether it's going to convince the American people. Now, of course, this Trump indictment, in many ways, I think, and I know Dan Worthington will agree with me, I think this was the wrong move for the. I think that this is only going to. We're already seeing Trump's numbers going up, and what we're doing. This is also bad for the Republicans because now we're giving this guy all the attention that he wants, and then we're just playing right in his game. Whereas if we didn't notice him and we didn't give him attention, DeSantis, because let's say, like I said in my monologue, even if he's convicted, Donald Trump can still run for the White House. Okay.
Good luck to him. Good luck to him running for White House and Green House and Brown
but he can
House.
still win, Sasha. He can win.
No. Steve, come on. What is it? Entertainment show? You mean?
It is. It is an
person
entertainment
who will, all pictures during election will show him being booked. The fingerprints will be taken.
No, I you only say that because you hate his guts. There's a real chance that he could get elected because of Biden's weakness and the weakness of the Democrats on the economy and every other issue. Practically,
let's first talk about. You think
I don't like that idea, but
I know. But tell me, do you think in this present state of affairs, do you think he's capable to win the nomination of Republican Party?
Yeah.
Yes.
The Republican Party will say, "Well, sorry, he's the most capable to run."
Steve, what are the
well, it
chances of
doesn't
getting a
matter. He's
conviction?
popular, That's that. It doesn't
What
matter
did
how
you say, Lee?
capable he is.
What are the chances of getting a conviction? What are the consequences legally?
Well,
of getting
that
a
we don't know, Lee. It's too early to tell. There's no specifics that have been released. First of all, let's realize that this is a grand jury indictment. I heard some political science, constitutional law professors talk about this morning. That means that it's not the litmus test of the real trial. So there's still evidence that needs to be put forward. He may not be convicted. There's always a difference between a charge and a conviction. So
I understand that, but why would a prosecutor bring a losing case?
I don't know.
Simple reasons.
We don't know if it's a losing case or not.
I mean, it'd be interesting to see, and there's various reasons that people bring charges. Sometimes it's if you watch enough crime dramas in both real life and fictional, there are a number of reasons that people will float losing causes.
Mark, any lawyer will tell you judges do not like to be overturned.
That
It
is
doesn't
very
look
true.
good on the record. I imagine prosecutors do not like to lose cases normally.
Okay, that's a valid point. But I would like to mention, not forget that grand jury, the 12 selected, supposedly independent people.
There's more than 12 on the grand jury. Only 12 have to say yes, but there's more than 12.
What do you mean more than 12?
Dan, how many people on the grand jury?
There's a ham sandwich also.
No. How many people on the grand jury of what?
I don't know the number. It may differ from state to state.
Okay.
Yeah,
But
I'll have to
it doesn't
find
have
out.
to be
I can look that
unanimous.
up and everything.
Yeah.
Hey, just really quickly, just to pivot just slightly, because both of you are talking about Biden and China, and this actually comes back to the economy as well. But there is a new rule that just came out recently, and the Biden administration is doing some laws around electric cars. They're saying they're going to have electric cars ineligible for tax credit, and the Biden administration hoping its guideline for up to $7,500 in tax credit will encourage automakers to reduce their reliance on, guess what, China for batteries and raw material. So I guess this is a time where he's actually going up against China because they're, I guess, pushing the whole electric vehicle notion, because officials hope the change will push car makers to move their supply chain out of China and to the United States or its allies. And the rules are a result of that Inflation Reduction Act, which Democrats
Well,
passed last
a lot
year.
of good that'll do, because that's where most of the source materials are, is in China. The problem is they control most of the strategic reserves when it comes to anything electrical, and so it's going to be hard to source those minerals and elements anywhere else unless you pay an arm and a leg. China knows that. They've deliberately done that as part of their Belt Initiative to control the supply chain. They're also controlling the production chain. Most of the solar panels come from China, and that's the problem.
Well, apparently officials in the United States, Europe, and elsewhere have also begun discussing plans to build a kind of buyers club for critical minerals. So I guess they're going to try to get together with some of the other parts of the world to try to find other places to get the material other than China. And yes, China is a large portion of where we get all of this material from, but apparently they are thinking that we can get it from other places other than China, Russia, and North Korea, and Iran, which are not exactly friends of ours and all in that space. So I don't know, Steve, any thoughts on this as a notion, and are we going to see this being a workable plan?
What plan is that, Mark?
To kind of like with the electric cars, to try to like encourage more electrical cars, and to actually have some efforts to make it more feasible to have that here in the United States.
Yeah, well, there's actually an autonomous electric car driving in one of the parks here in Cary, which is in North Carolina, where we live, the sixth largest state in North Carolina, city in North Carolina. And I do think that, well, first of all, we are seeing more charging stations in different local governments and cities around North Carolina as I look at that prism, but still not enough, right? I mean, so how are you going to put more of those charging stations? But the other conversation that we haven't had is, if there are going to be more vehicles, the plan that isn't workable is that there's no taxing mechanism for these electric cars. So the more and more electric cars we have in North Carolina, the more fuel efficient cars, that's less money coming in.
I'm sorry, Steve. Our electric bills, there's taxes on electric bills. What do you mean there's no money coming in? Our
Cars.
electric bills are going to be going up.
Right now,
but got to charge them, Steve.
Yeah,
That's what he's trying to say. You pay
Yeah.
for electricity.
No, but right now, let's look at North Carolina, for example. Right now, there's not a tax placed on electric vehicles like there is on the gas tax. Okay, so in North Carolina, if they don't change the law, then and everybody drives an electric car, then
Right.
you're basically having no revenue coming into the state.
I don't understand. When they charge
Don't
that
the
electric
states
car,
have a
the
tax
electric
on the
bill is going to
electricity?
go up. The taxes that are included in the electric bill will go up.
But
I
not-
agree they're not going to be paying the gasoline tax. They'll pay electric tax. What's the difference?
There's a big difference from a revenue. I'll have to get the details, but I can tell you that as we are actually developing more fuel efficient cars, the revenues of North Carolina and our state have dipped. Before COVID, the DOT's revenue was 400 million in the hole, and
So
it got
sorry.
yeah. So
Hey,
I don't know what the answer is. I mean, yeah, maybe
We'll
there
bring
is
on
a-
some people to
so
bring
these
this
are the
question.
issues that have to be worked out. There has to be some, maybe it is electricity, but some kind of a vehicle miles travel tax or some kind of a tax that imposed. Otherwise, people are going to say, well, I'm just going to buy an electric vehicle, pay a small fee. And then there's, and we're so on DOT projects right now. So
Hey, I got another question for everybody, and this is actually one I know that folks are going to love because it involves another political candidate. How do you create a board that is going to be an oversight board and all of that stuff, and then the corporation strips the power of the board? Because apparently Disney and DeSantis are in a battle, and I'm still trying to understand this battle. Because one, I thought that the governor would have complete power in that sense and everything if he's the one that's creating the board, but apparently Disney has managed to strip the power from their board. So I'm going like there's a whole battle between Mickey and DeSantis and all in that space, but I am not in those corporate kind of boardrooms and everything. So please explain this to me and explain to everybody else who's watching how this happens. One, how you create a board to attack Disney and everything, and then the corporation itself strips the power from the board that you created.
I'm not following closely what's going on, so I can't comment.
Okay.
yeah, I mean, I think for Disney, it's just different times now, and especially if DeSantis becomes president, it's going to be hard to see kind of what happens. But
Well,
you know,
but apparently, and this is
Mark,
all over the news.
I just
Y'all
want
can
to
look it up
piggyback
and
on something
everything.
Steve said before we get off topic completely in terms of electric vehicles. In terms of the grid, I don't know that the grid can support more and more people getting electric cars. California had a problem a couple summers ago. They told people stop charging your cars.
yeah, that's a good
So
point.
you will get horses to get your car stowed.
That might be the answer, Sasha.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, but then you'd have a bunch of poop on the sidewalks and everything. So
Back to bicycles, maybe.
Bicycles would be another idea to try.
Yeah, but then we have Steve's problem. If we all go bicycles, the tax revenues are going to go down.
Oh,
they'll just tax the hell out of
Yeah,
bicycles.
Steve, why is that, Steve? If you drive on the street by car, you have to pay tax revenues to rebuild the roads. But bicycles get a pass; they don't have to pay anything. No one's
No,
concerned
They
about
don't,
that.
they're not gas powered.
Yeah,
But it's still
yeah.
good. But they haven't. They're still using the roads.
Yeah, but come on, they're biking.
No, not really.
Yeah, no, we're not going to have
Really?
that. But I want to come back to, and I'm going to give y'all a little bit of the context, and then y'all can comment. But like I said, this seems to be some more political wrangling. But it sounds over the last couple of months, definitely Governor DeSantis declared victory in his year-long effort to restrict the autonomy of Disney World. It's the state's largest employer. He even said there's a new sheriff in town, and he handpicked a oversight board, but nobody seemed to pay attention, however, to an important detail, which was that Disney maneuvered to restrict the governor's effort, and in early February at a public meeting held by the previous Disney-controlled oversight board, the company pushed through a development agreement that would limit the new board's power for decades to come. And so now the governor's appointees have discovered what went on. So it seems to me that there was a lot of that political maneuvering that was going on and all in that space. And in this case, I think DeSantis got sidestepped and got kind of like in that chess move. He might have got not quite checkmate, but he definitely got a threat on the chessboard that he was not expecting. If I can use the chess.
Bobbity boo. Who cares?
Interesting.
I mean, if they did that, they're going to pay the price, right? Because he's just going to retaliate.
He's gonna find some way to retaliate, but yeah, but that's the whole thing. And then the retaliation, what kind of impact is that going to have? They're the largest employer there in that area. I would think the retaliation might impact even his own political future. And they're talking about him being a leading candidate for president. So I mean, does he really want to take on Disney and all in that space? Apparently he does. But I'm asking y'all, is this going to backfire in his face when that is a large employer? There's the largest employer there in the state of Florida.
Hey, but more people don't work for Disney than do work for Disney. So you have to look at the bigger picture.
Yeah, that makes sense because they're the largest employer, but they are, if you put the rest of the employers together, then yeah, they are not the biggest one, but they are scattered throughout the state of Florida. And of course, they've got all kinds of folks that are doing all kinds of jobs in there. As a matter of fact, we used to have one. I wonder if we can get him back on at some point. But I know Brandon actually has a job with Disney. I think he's in charge of their touring trips right now. So we'll have to see if we can't get Brandon back on and maybe he can give us some insight as to what is going on in that particular war and all in those lines, because definitely it'll be interesting. And he was a regular with us until he got that nice paying job over there at Disney. So I think Kim is still in touch with him. So I'll see if she wants to reach out to him and all in that space.
What's he doing for Disney? Do you have any idea?
Media, I think.
Media, and I think he's the person that literally guides the tours. So like if there's a touring trip and when they do the trips around, he is the person in charge of that. So he is like the production manager. That's the word I was looking for.
Interesting.
He was a great guy.
Allowed to give discounts?
I'm sorry, what did you say, Sasha?
Is he allowed to give discounts to his favorite people?
I'm sure he is. We need to reach out to him. If Disney comes to Canada, maybe he can give you and your lovely wife a discount. We'll have to see if that is entirely possible.
Sasha, I probably missed it, but any insight about Finland coming into NATO and how this affects Russia?
Who is coming?
Finland.
Oh, Finland. I don't think that there are any benefits to Russia or Russian people from Finland being member of NATO, because I remember the Finland, and that was they were thinking would happen to Ukraine. Because remember when Finland was attacked in 1940, and it was horrible, fierce fight between Russia and Finland. Russia is much stronger and bigger army, but they suffered tremendous casualties, and they made a peace with Finland. And once German later on attacked Russia, Finland was obviously on the side of Germany. So when Russia defeated with Western allies Germany, Finland has suffered its consequences. However, they were able to have a peace with Russia. They gave substantial part of its territory to Russia, and that's what Russia today thought that what would happen to Ukraine. So in order to save the country, Ukraine will cede part of half, whatever part of its territory to Russia, and Russia will sort of abide by a peace agreement, maybe for 6-9 months, if at all. But that's not happening so far. The Ukrainians are becoming much more cautious than they were in 1994 at signing this shameful Budapest memorandum. And I think Budapest memorandum is one of the reasons why West, and particularly England and United States, helping Ukraine that much, because they also signed that shameful memorandum.
Hey, Lee, and I'm glad you gave that answer. I just have a question for Lee that was asked to me that I didn't really have a good answer for. And all in that space, I told y'all what I did on yesterday. But, and this is for everybody, because even Steve may have some interest in answers as well. Some of the gentlemen that were there were asking me, when immigrants come from other parts of the country and they create what basically amounts to insulated neighborhoods, how come those insulated neighborhoods get a lot of support from the community? They were thinking about like Little Russia, Little Italy, Little Germany, and a number of other things. But when communities that are more African American do that, they don't necessarily get the support. And that was a question that was posed to me by the fine folks of the Hebrew Israelites, and I didn't really have an answer for them. So I was wondering your
What type of support are you talking about?
Like if you, a lot of times there are neighborhoods that are created and they are ethnically oriented neighborhoods and they are supported by their communities, but it's not always across the board supported and everything is their argument. And I was just wondering if you had any thoughts about that and if you had seen that in New York, because like I said, you definitely have.
In New York, there are lots of neighborhoods like that. Like in Manhattan, you have Chinatown, you have Little Italy, you have lots of different neighborhoods that are ethnically oriented. I don't know why that's necessarily a bad thing, but when support, I'm not sure what you mean. The cities should support it financially. So people
not so much supported financially, but it's like if the Indian community comes in and they build a community in their community, then they get support, one, from the community, but they also get support from the folks within the city. Like New York supports Little Italy, New York supports a number of those other things. Whereas it happens in the minority community, it's there's charges of gentrification.
Mark, why people do support this community?
You've got Harlem. I mean, what's wrong with that?
Well, Harlem has been very much gentrified. Harlem is not minority black anymore in a lot of ways. Really? Yes. There have been a lot of people that moved into Harlem from various other communities, and it doesn't have that kind of support. And that's part of the argument that people have made, is that when those things happen and people move, we've even seen it here in Durham, a lot of people are moving into the quote unquote historically black neighborhoods and are integrating it, but you don't necessarily see that, for example, I imagine, and I've yet to visit Steve's home, but I imagine that it is largely a Indian community that he is mostly at and everything. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we have a huge Indian community here. More than neighborhoods are majority Indian, especially in Morrisville, Cary. Some neighborhoods that are 80% Indian. It's not really like and there's a lot of Indian associations. And so there's a separate kind of Indian kind of city now, or sub-community building within towns. I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but as the community grows, it's only normal for immigrants from any community and that might be what it is. Maybe the communities that are doing more are immigrants, whereas the black communities, these neighborhoods might have been here for, at this point, hundreds and hundreds of years, unless you're from Nigeria or Haiti or one of those countries. So that could be it, Mark. I don't know why there's a.
I tend to agree with Steve. Like even like in Brooklyn, I know there's neighborhoods like Little Pakistan that these are immigrant-based communities.
Yeah.
When people come in to immigrate here, they feel comfortable going to these communities. Not that they don't want to be Americans, but their culture, and they want to bring
Yeah.
that with them.
Like when I
And
grew
I
up in
get
West,
that.
when I grew up in West Virginia, there weren't many Indians in the state, and so my father had like his best friend who was just here last week, and a couple of other doctors, and they all had the same food. The Indian Association. I used to remember when I was a kid, every Friday my mother would cook Indian food, and we'd rotate it every Friday, and they would be able to talk about what's going on at home, their parents. They would talk the language. It was a good time just to feel because they got homesick
But
and
how
they
much
wanted to be.
in those communities? How much do you hear the dialogue? Because I've heard it definitely in some of the dialogues in both the African American and the Indian communities of America. Love it or leave it. I don't hear that being said to the Pakistanis that much. That have those Pakistani neighborhoods or the Italian neighborhoods and all of that. They are allowed to flourish and live their nature of being identified by that community that they came from, but also some integrated, but not fully integrated into America. So, like I said, it does seem like it is sometimes a double standard. But that's just a question that was asked of me, and I didn't want to hear y'all's response. And some of the folks may be watching,
Hey,
maybe
Mark,
they'll have thoughts as well.
just a comment.
Law
I'm not
abiding and hardworking.
I'm not sure that these communities, little Pakistan, the little Italy, China, they really care what other people think. So why does this particular community that you're talking about care what outsiders think?
And
Just do
sometimes
what you
people
want to
get
do.
too caught up in what people think. There was a whole discussion, and some people were of the opinion, and I will definitely say that this group was Black nationalists, and there are nationalists of all sorts and everything. But they were also wondering if integration in some ways may not have hurt certain communities because you didn't get the same kind of support from within that you did before integration and all in that space. But like I said, it was a question that was asked of me, and I was just curious as to what folks' reactions were and what their thoughts were, and y'all have given that. So
I think
We pretty much get to choose where we live, do we not?
There are
say
two.
what?
We pretty much get to choose where we live, what communities we live in.
To some degree, I mean, there's some people that would look at the housing rules, and there are definitely things that go in redlining and other kind of communities. So I don't know that you are 100% allowed to choose where you want to live, because there are communities that will definitely discourage you from coming into your community if they are of a certain ethnic group or a certain style. So I can't say that you're always allowed to live where you want to live.
As long
Well,
as
you got the money.
rent, you will live where you want to live. As long as you can pay the rent, that's all.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean, there's some folks that will, like, there are neighborhoods that literally have restrictive rules and everything, and they have their establishments. I don't know that necessarily that, and even Nick has said this, that there are certain places that he's aware of that people are not allowed to live at because they have their unidentified rules, and there may not be.
Well, when you buy a
written in
condo,
stone.
don't they have to vote for new members to join?
Right, and there's communities like that where they have to vote. Exactly. There are
And
those
Nick lives
places.
in a gated community, the same thing. I would
There were
imagine.
a few projects in Toronto in about the late 70s, early 80s, where idea was, because of policy of multiculturalism, was to create a certain communities. So there would be run like cooperatives, where, for example, one let's say Ukrainian cooperative, and then another Pakistani cooperative, and then something else, Hungarian maybe. And so they would restrict people who can move in these cooperatives, that they have to belong to this nationality or nation. It was popular for a while, for a few years. And then they started to figure out that once they settled and they live there, and they're building something of value, but to resell that is becoming impossible, because you must find, and see if it's Hungarian cooperative, you must find Hungarian, so he would be eligible to move in. So now people who are not necessarily Hungarian, say they're Armenian or from Serbia or somewhere else, they were trying to now manufacture some evidence that they are actually Hungarian, maybe not direct Hungarian, but they're people, they're relatives.
Because it would be
500
interesting.
years ago were Hungarians. So it was actually, then they wanted to convert that into actual condominiums because they wanted to realize the value. They were living there for so many years. Now they wanted to, some of them did very well in business or in professions, or so they want to move out, so they want to sell it, move somewhere else, and they don't care anymore to be among Hungarians or the Pakistanis only. Now they want to leave wherever they work is, their children go to schools or so on. And it's becoming now impediment. Now it's a very complicated process. They cannot sell their property. So how good this project was? Nothing. It was disaster. And a lot of people actually left this project without even getting any return on their money. Supposedly, the game plan was so they will live there for so many years, they will build up an equity, and then when it comes appropriate time, they can sell it, perhaps. Or maybe they will remain there, maybe their children will continue to live there. Complete disaster, 100%.
Like I said, we'll find out how that all works and everything. I do see that Steve is back. He's going to wind up. Me and Sasha got to get ready to go to our other program and all in that space. I did see what somebody wrote about the trans athletes that are actually competing and all in that space. So we're going to have that conversation as well. Maybe we'll bring that up tomorrow. And Steve, I know you're going to close out and I'm going to go help on his show and all, but don't eat any pizza because apparently it hurt the post recently. So everybody.
I just got a quick question for Steve. Steve, are you taller than Biden or shorter?
Say that again.
Are you taller or shorter than Biden?
He's tall. He's tall.
He is tall?
Mm-hmm. He's taller.
So you were actually looking up to him while he was talking to you.
Yeah, he also has blue eyes. I never realized that. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, he's better. He looks better in person than on TV for sure.
Snip your hair.
Well, listen, guys, it's been a great show. We'll see you tomorrow on Monday, and I'm going to be in and out the next few months because lots of work stuff and everything. But when I am here, I will host the show. Next week, we'll be talking about the Trump indictment when he's arraigned in court on Tuesday and what this is going to mean for the presidential election, and continue to talk about the CHIPS and Science Act. Hoping Dr. Ronnie Chatterjee can come, who's actually implementing this CHIPS Act for the president. He's returning to Duke here next month to get back at the Fuqua School of Business as a professor. But thank you all so much, and be safe this weekend wherever you are in the country or the world.
Good weekend.
Good, and we'll catch y'all later.